Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Michael sensed that something was wrong. The evening was drawing to a close in their small home in suburban Minneapolis. The kitchen was in twilight. A lamp was dimly shining above the table. The children had already finished dinner and ran to their rooms. Jessica washed dishes at the sink, looking away from her husband. It would seem like an ordinary family evening, but Michael noticed little things that did not fit into the usual picture. He put down his fork and looked carefully at his wife's back. Jessica's movements were harsh and tense. She remained silent throughout dinner, although she usually did not stop talking about the news of the day or making fun of the children's school stories. Today, silence hung between them, interrupted only by the clanking of dishes and the crackling of the old refrigerator. Michael once again replayed the past day in his head. Nothing unusual. Work in a car repair shop from morning to evening, then grocery shopping, home to the family. He returned around 6. Jessica was already at home with the children, as always. But something changed subtly. As soon as he crossed the threshold, his wife seemed to move away. She kissed him on the cheek out of habit, but her gaze was absent-minded, and her hands nervously fiddled with the edge of her apron. At dinner, she ate little and made almost no conversation. 10-year-old Josh chatted happily about how he scored a goal during recess. 15-year-old Megan complained about a difficult algebra test. Usually, Jessica listened carefully to the children, encouraged them, and joked. And today, it was as if my thoughts were somewhere far away. Even the children noticed. At some point, Megan asked reproachfully, "Mom, are you listening to me?" Jessica woke up, smiled tightly, and apologized, but soon fell silent again. Now, looking at her tense back, Michael could not stand it. "Everything is fine?" he asked quietly, trying to speak calmly. Jessica flinched as if she hadn't expected his voice. "Yes, yes, everything is fine," she answered without turning around. She washed the foam off the last plate and exhaled noisily, just a little tired. She took off her rubber gloves, threw them into the sink, and finally turned to her husband. A smile flashed across her face, insincere, strained, hiding something. Michael had known this face for 20 years and immediately knew that she was lying. Once upon a time, in his youth, he had seen the same false smile when he asked if she liked the gift that he had chosen poorly. She didn't want to upset him then, so she pretended to be happy. Now, what is she hiding? "Are you sure?" he asked, getting up from the table. "You're kind of quiet today. Did something happen at work?" Jessica wiped her hands on a towel, avoiding his gaze. "No, it's okay," she said and walked past him, heading into the living room. "Just thinking. Sorry if it seemed like I wasn't listening." Michael followed her. In the living room, a lamp cast a soft light on a cozy mess. Pillows scattered on the sofa, children's toys on the carpet. Jessica stopped at the door, crossing her arms defensively. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly, trying to speak softly. Anxiety grew inside him. It wasn't like normal fatigue or a bad mood. Something tormented her, fenced her off from her family. He felt it on his skin. "Yes, nothing in particular," she answered evasively and pretended to notice the scattered toys. She bent down and began putting her son's cars into a box. Michael came closer, helping her pick up the teddy bear from the floor. My heart was pounding loudly. He was afraid to voice his guesses, but he didn't want to back down either. They never kept secrets from each other. Until now. "Jess, I see something is bothering you," he said softly, placing his hand on her shoulder. Under my fingers, I felt her tense even more. "Tell me. We are together, no matter what happens." She froze, clutching a toy car in her hands. For a moment, it seemed to Michael that his wife was about to tell him everything. Her eyes flashed, her lips trembled, as if the words were about to fall out. But instead, Jessica lowered her gaze and carefully removed her shoulder from under his palm. "Really, everything's fine," she said quietly. "Just a rough day." She turned and walked towards the stairs to the second floor. "I'll go to bed early. I'm very tired today," she said over her shoulder. Michael remained standing in the middle of the living room, clutching the teddy bear in his hands. A chill rose in my soul. He watched Jessica disappear upstairs and heard the bedroom door close. What's going on anyway? She's clearly not saying something. Disease? Problems at work? Or, no, not that. He drove away the thought of possible betrayal as soon as it flashed. Jessica is a faithful wife and loving mother. Yes, there were difficult times, quarrels over money or everyday trifles, but they always stuck to each other. She suddenly couldn't. No. However, the anxiety did not go away. Michael sighed and took the box of toys to the corner. Then I went to check on the children. Josh was already asleep, sprawled out on the bed, the blanket bunched up at his feet. Michael quietly corrected it and ran his hand through his son's soft brown hair. He muttered something in his sleep and smiled. Michael's heart sank with love and pain at the same time. For the sake of the children, he must remain calm. A nightlight was burning in my daughter's room. Megan sat on the bed with her laptop on her lap. Seeing her father at the door, she took off her headphones. "Is everything okay, Dad?" she asked in a low voice. "Did you and your mom quarrel?" Michael came in and sat down on the edge of her bed. "No, we didn't quarrel," he answered tiredly, trying to smile. "Mom is just tired today. She's probably having difficulties at work." Megan pursed her lips in disbelief. "She's kind of strange," the daughter said quietly. "The whole evening is silent, and lately she's been on her phone all the time." Michael tensed. "On the phone?" "Well, yes, he is corresponding with someone." Smiles when reading messages, Megan complained. "And as soon as I walk in, she immediately hides the phone. I thought maybe she was discussing something with you or with Aunt Lizzie. But in front of you, she also stared at the screen today." Here it is confirmation of his vague worries. Correspondence, secrecy, smiles at secret messages. I saw before my eyes images of many films and stories of friends where it all started exactly like this. "Don't worry, honey," he told his daughter, stroking her head. "It's probably just a friend writing something. Mom will tell you everything herself when she's ready." Megan nodded, although she looked unconvinced. Michael kissed her forehead. "Good night. Try not to worry, okay?" "Okay, Dad," she sighed, lying down and pulling on the blanket. "Good night to you, too." He turned off the night light and went out, closing the door. My heart was now pounding somewhere in my throat. So Jessica is texting someone and hiding it. Smiles while reading messages. The upstairs hallway was dark and quiet. There is not a sound outside their bedroom door. It seems that Jessica really went to bed. Michael approached the door, raised his hand. He suddenly had a painful desire to open it, go in, hug his wife, and feel that everything was the same as before. That these suspicions are just a figment of his imagination. The hand froze in the air. If he comes in now and asks directly, there will be a scandal, and the children are already scared. No, you need to calm down first and gather the facts. Michael went downstairs heavily. He remembered that he had left the phone in the kitchen. Entering there, he saw a glowing screen on the table. It was Jessica's phone. Apparently, she left it there when she went upstairs. The screen blinked again, revealing an incoming message. Michael automatically reached out and took the phone before thought could dissuade him. The screen flashed a message from a contact he didn't know, Richard. The text read, "I can't stop thinking about you. I miss. Good night, darling." Michael felt a chill inside. He reread the message 2-3 times, as if he hoped he had misunderstood. But the words did not disappear. "I miss you. Good night, darling." My throat is dry. He lowered the phone onto the table like one lowers evidence of a crime. My hands began to tremble. Who is Richard? And why does he write such words to his wife? "I can't stop thinking about you." Michael closed his eyes, feeling a hot wave rise to his face. A treacherous voice inside whispered, "Everything is exactly as you feared." Michael forced himself to take a deep breath. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe Richard is an old friend or colleague, but why would a friend write darling and miss her at night? He understood that it was pointless to deceive himself. My heart sank with pain and anger at the same time. Jessica, his Jess, with whom they lived for so many years. Could she really? The room was stuffy. Michael jerked open the window above the kitchen sink. The cold spring night air blew into my face. He took a deep breath, trying to stop his hands from trembling. Jessica's phone quietly went off, returning the kitchen to darkness. But Michael had already seen more than he wanted. His calm life began to crack, and he stood in the middle of the dark kitchen, feeling an icy emptiness spreading in his chest. Of course, he couldn't know for sure until he talked to her. This thought suddenly gave him determination. He will not torment himself with doubts. We need to find out the truth immediately. Michael grabbed his wife's phone, clutching it tightly in his palm, and decisively headed up the stairs. His steps echoed loudly in the quiet house. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. Each beat seemed to count down the seconds until the end of my former life. He stopped in front of the bedroom door. For a moment, fear and anger fought inside, but he has already made his choice. Michael slowly turned the knob and entered the room, holding her phone in his hand. The bedroom was almost dark, only a sliver of light from the corridors slid across the floor when Michael opened the door. Jessica lay on their wide bed with her back to the door. Hearing footsteps, she raised herself up on her elbow. "Mike," her voice sounded sleepy and surprised. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Michael stepped forward, holding the phone in his hand. My heart was pounding against my ribs. He felt anger boiling in his chest, hot, suffocating. But seeing the silhouette of his wife on the bed, he tried to restrain himself. They should talk calmly, as much as possible. He turned on the night light on the nightstand. Soft light filled the room. Jessica squinted at the sudden light and sat up, straightening the tangled blanket. Seeing her phone in her husband's hands, she turned pale. There was a heavy silence for a moment. They looked at each other, Michael standing, breathing heavily, Jessica sitting on the bed, pressing her hand to her throat. "What is this, Jess?" Michael broke the silence hoarsely. He picked up the phone, showing the screen. The message was still open. "Who is Richard?" Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was silent for too long, and that was all she said. Michael felt the world finally disappearing from under his feet. He nodded slowly, as if confirming his own worst fears. "It's not what you think," Jessica finally whispered, looking away. "Not what I think?" he echoed. The voice sounded foreign, cracked. "What do I think, Jess? What do you think?" She clutched the edge of the blanket with her fingers. The eyes sparkled, either from tears or from fear. "Michael," she began pleadingly, "let's talk about it tomorrow. Please." But Michael was already overwhelmed by despair. "Tomorrow," he smiled bitterly. "So you have time to come up with a plausible lie." "No, really. I want the truth. Now." He took a step closer. "Are you cheating on me?" Having said this out loud, he himself was amazed at his own words. Just this morning, he could not even think about this, and now the question hung in the air, poisoning the entire 20 years of their life together. Jessica covered her face with her hands. "Sorry." She exhaled almost silently. Michael wasn't sure if he had heard correctly. "What?" he asked again, feeling how everything inside had broken off. She lowered her hands, tears flowing down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," Jessica repeated, looking into his eyes. "I didn't want this to happen." Michael looked at her as if he didn't recognize her. His chest was constricted from pain. It seemed that just a little more, and he would not be able to breathe. "So is this true?" he whispered. Are you cheating on me?" Jessica sobbed and covered her face, not daring to look at him. That was enough. The world was collapsing, and the debris hurt his heart. He sank to the edge of the bed, feeling a sudden weakness in his legs. "How long ago?" Michael asked dully, staring at the floor. "How long does this take, Jess?" She wiped away her tears with a trembling palm. "Several months," admitted in a whisper. I didn't mean to hurt you." Michael laughed bitterly, but his laugh sounded like a groan. He turned to her, not believing his ears. You've been dating another man for several months behind my back. You lie to me every day, and you didn't mean to cause pain. Well, that turned out great, Jess. She sobbed, covering her face. I'm so sorry. Her tears slightly extinguished the flame of anger in him, leaving only a dull pain. Before him was still the woman whom he had loved almost his entire adult life. Despite the betrayal, the heart could not instantly stop loving. Instead of rage came a bitter plea. Why? Michael whispered. Explain to me. Why did you do this? I thought we had a strong family. We love each other. We have children. A spasm squeezed his throat. He said with difficulty, I love you, Jess. Is this not enough? Jessica lowered her hands and looked at him with eyes blurred from tears. Michael, I love you too. She began, but he flushed. Don't you dare say that. He jumped to his feet, feeling a new surge of anger. Do you love? This is not what you do to those you love. This is another love. She whispered barely audibly. Michael froze, trying to comprehend her words. Another love? Jessica nodded, dropping her shoulders. I didn't want to, honestly. I struggled with myself for a long time. But when we met, everything turned out so unexpectedly. I didn't even notice how attached I became to him. At first we just talked, then I realized that I was looking forward to every meeting. It was like an obsession. I'm sorry. She spoke haltingly, crying again. I didn't plan this, Mike. He was silent, frozen, trying to find support in her words. But there was no support, only chaos. Finally, he exhaled. Who is he? This Richard. Who is he to you? Jessica took a shuddering breath. We met at work. He's a client. He was a client. Then he started inviting me for coffee and lunch. At first I refused, but he is persistent and very charming. She spoke confusedly, as if justifying herself to herself. He owns a company, a big client of ours. We talked a lot about business, and somehow... She hesitated. Did you sleep with him? Michael interrupted her harshly, not even recognizing his voice. Jessica sobbed louder. For several seconds she did not answer, only the crying turned into sobs. And this was also enough from her reaction. He understood everything. Michael felt his legs give way, but he stood firm. There was a noise in my ears, my hands were numb. He took a few steps away, trying to process what he had heard. His wife cheated on him. Physically, emotionally, whatever. Several months of deception. It seemed that reality was distorted, like in a nightmare. He walked over to the chest of drawers and grabbed the edge, looking into the mirror above it. From there, a face distorted with suffering looked at him, pale, eyes red and shining. He barely recognized himself. Do you love him? He asked quietly, looking at his reflection, not at her. There was a rustling sound behind her as Jessica got out of bed. A few moments of silence then. I think yes. Her voice trembled. I think I love him, Michael. From these words, something inside him seemed to break completely. He closed his eyes. I wanted to scream, throw something, punch the wall, but he just stood there, clutching the chest of drawers. He took a deep breath, then exhaled, trying to stay on the edge. What about me? His voice broke. What about the children? Our family? You were thinking about all this when... He stopped short, swallowing with difficulty the lump in his throat. Why did you even marry me, have children, if in the end like this? Don't talk like that. She whispered pleadingly. We had so many happy years. Is it true? I am grateful to you for everything. But people change. I have changed. It became hard for me. Hard? Michael turned around, looking at her with inflamed eyes. What was hard for you? We lived as usual. I worked all day long, trying to provide for my family. You also work, raise children. Isn't this normal? That's the point, Jessica whispered, lowering her head. Everything is as usual. Every day the same thing. You are constantly at work, you get tired. At home life, routine. We've become like neighbors, Mike. Almost no heart-to-heart conversations. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I felt empty. It's like my life is passing me by. And you decided that the solution was to destroy the family. he asked bitterly. I didn't plan this, she suddenly blurted out. I tried to revive everything between us again, really, but you. Her voice trembled and she fell silent. What am I? Michael asked coldly. Jessica sobbed. You have become somehow distant, always tired, withdrawn. We practically stopped being a couple. Only parents, housemates, and Richard. He was so attentive, he listened to me, spoke beautiful words, gave gifts. Next to him, I felt like a desired woman again, and not just a mother and a housewife. She said it quickly, as if she was afraid of her own courage. Sorry, I know it's selfish, but I'm also a human. I wanted happiness. Happiness? Michael echoed, feeling the bitter irony. Do you think you'll find him? She covered her face with her hands and shook her head. I don't know. I'm confused. I just feel good with him. He can give me what we will never have. She looked around the modest bedroom, the old furniture. He's rich, Mike. With him, I do not need anything, travel, live a different life. So that's it. Finally, the truth, cruel and naked, came out. She goes to the rich man because he has something to give her. And Michael is just a simple auto mechanic, always counting pennies until his salary. The corners of his mouth twitched into a grin. It's clear. He drew hoarsely. Money, beautiful life. You've always wanted this, right? Am I just a stepping stone on the way? No, she screamed, taking a step towards him. Don't you dare say that. I loved you. I loved children. I just... She was confused, unable to find words. I'm just tired of being poor and tired. I'm tired of pulling the strap. Yes, Richard is wealthy. Don't I deserve a little happiness? Michael laughed bitterly through the tears that came to his eyes. Happiness at the expense of a broken family? Are you listening to yourself, Jess? She sobbed louder, dropping her head. There was a pause, interrupted by her sobs. Michael looked at his wife, someone else's, distant. The one with whom I shared shelter and dreams. How did they get to this point? Did he really miss the moment when she became unhappy? He remembered the last years, work, debts, mortgages, rare holidays. He thought they were enduring hardships together for the sake of the future. And she, it turns out, was accumulating disappointment. The pain suddenly turned into fatigue. He dropped his shoulders. So what now? Michael asked quietly. What are you going to do? Jessica slowly raised her eyes to him. They showed anguish, fear, but also determination. I need to leave, she breathed. I've already made my decision. I wanted to tell you, I still didn't know how. I'm sorry. The word sounded like a shot. Despite everything he had heard earlier, the final confession stunned him. Michael felt an icy hand squeeze his heart. He barely said, Leave. For him? Jessica nodded, sobbing again. Yes, he's waiting for me. I will move in with him. Michael closed his eyes, trying to hold back the tears. That's it. Their marriage is over. 20 years together, and one night she leaves for another. Incredible. When? He asked in a colorless voice. Today, he knew that I was going to tell everything, and he's waiting for me at the hotel today, so we'll be together later. She didn't finish, but the meaning was clear, so that later we could start a new life together. Despair and anger surged within him again. You were going to tell. Does that mean you were already planning to leave? He shook his head, smiling bitterly. How long have you played the role of a loving wife? Haven't found an alternate airfield yet. Jessica's face contorted in pain at his words, but she didn't protest. Instead, she said quietly, I'm really sorry. Michael suddenly realized that he could no longer be around. He felt sick, in pain, and wanted to scream. He took a few steps towards the bedroom door, trying to maintain what little composure he had. What should I tell the children? He asked suddenly, looking over his shoulder. There was a lump in my throat. How do you explain to Megan and Josh that their mother abandoned them in the middle of the night? At these words, Jessica raised her head, her face distorted with agony. No, I won't leave my children, she sobbed. I will come and see each other. It's just necessary now. Then everything will work out. I'll talk to them, I promise. Just not today. Late, Michael answered dully. They already feel everything. He walked out into the corridor, feeling as if the walls were falling in. There were hurried steps behind him. Jessica rushed after him. Mike, Mike, please. She grabbed his hand. He turned around. In the faint light of the corridor, her face was tear-stained. Her eyes were pleading. Don't go like that, she whispered. Say something. Michael pulled his hand away from her fingers. What should I tell you, Jess? There was no warmth left in the voice, only fatigue. You made a choice. I can't hold you by force. If you want to leave, leave. I'm sorry, she whispered again, reaching out to him. But Michael pulled away. He could neither forgive nor understand her now. The wound is too fresh. He went downstairs, almost running down the steps so as not to hear her sobs anymore. A quiet voice came from behind. I didn't want to. Michael walked into the living room and collapsed on the sofa. One thought was pounding in my head. This is the end. He covered his face with his hands. The room shook before my eyes. Muffled sounds came from somewhere above. Jessica was probably rushing about, collecting things. He didn't know how much time had passed, seconds or minutes. Somewhere a clock was ticking. Finally, a door slammed upstairs. Quiet footsteps on the stairs. Michael lowered his hands and looked towards the hallway. Jessica came downstairs with a small suitcase. She changed clothes instead of pajamas. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, and sneakers were hastily pulled on her feet. My eyes are swollen from crying. They made eye contact. Michael was at a loss for words. He watched as his wife, now almost a stranger, approached the door. Near the door, she stopped and said quietly, I'll contact you tomorrow. No, today, later, I'll have to tell the children. Her voice trembled, but she tried to speak clearly. And I'll take the rest later. Michael nodded barely. It was as if he was speechless. Jessica punched the code into the electronic lock on the front door. Before leaving, I looked back. I'm sorry, Mike. Goodbye. The door opened, letting in the cool night air, and closed behind her, cutting off her silhouette. Michael sat motionless, staring into the empty hallway. The silence of the house was heavy on my ears. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaked. Perhaps the children woke up from the noise. It was necessary to go to them. But at that moment, Michael could not move. He closed his eyes and leaned his head back on the sofa. There was an emptiness in my chest. It seemed as if a part of him had gone with Jessica, leaving only a shell. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot, burning. Michael didn't know how long he sat there in the dark. Finally, the son's thin voice cut through the silence. Dad? Michael quickly wiped his face with the back of his hand and looked up. Little Josh stood on the stairs in wrinkled pajamas, looking worriedly at his father. Hello, friend. Why aren't you sleeping? Michael asked quietly, swallowing a lump. I heard voices. Did you and Mom scream? The boy went down a couple of steps, rubbing his sleepy eyes with his fists. Michael stood up with an effort and walked towards his son. He took him in his arms. Despite the increased weight, now he wanted to feel the closeness of the child, so as not to go crazy. Josh wrapped his arms around his father's neck. It's okay, baby, Michael whispered, although everything inside was shrinking. Mom left for a while. At night, Josh asked in surprise, looking at the dark window. Yes, she will be back soon, but for now you and I should sleep, he answered, not knowing what else to say. Deception to save children's sleep. The boy nodded trustingly, burying his nose in his shoulder. Michael carried his son upstairs, quietly stroking his back. He put Josh back in bed and covered him with a blanket. He almost immediately dozed off again, burying his face in his favorite pillow. After making sure that his son was asleep, Michael went out into the corridor. Megan's bedroom door was slightly open. He knocked softly and looked inside. Megan lay in bed, facing the wall. It was clear that she was pretending to be asleep. Her shoulders were tense. Her breathing was rapid. Maggie, Michael whispered. The daughter slowly turned over onto her back. Her eyes sparkled in the darkness. She was silent, waiting for him to say. Are you okay? He asked stupidly. She didn't answer. Only one word escaped her lips. Mother. The question hung in the air. Michael quietly entered, sat down next to him, and stroked his daughter's head. Mom left. She needs to be alone to sort things out. He tried to speak calmly, although his voice was trembling. This is not because of you and not because of Josh. None of this is your fault. It just happened between us. Megan's lips trembled. She left us, didn't she? The girl suddenly blurted out. Pain and anger rang in her voice. Because of that man she was texting about. Michael blinked in shock. The daughter understood everything. Perhaps she overheard part of their conversation or guessed. He wanted to deny it, but could not utter a lie. He just lowered his head. This was the answer. Megan sobbed. How could she? She whispered intermittently. Michael leaned over and hugged his daughter tightly. At first she froze, then buried her face in his chest. Her body was shaken by silent sobs. He held her, stroked her back, whispered, I'm here, I'm with you, everything will be fine, honey, I promise. But in his heart he had no idea how good it would be. What awaits the three of them now? The night dragged on endlessly. For the first time in his life, Michael did not wait for the morning to come. The morning greeted the Miller house with oppressive silence. Usually on a Saturday morning, the kitchen would come alive. The bacon was sizzling in the frying pan, the children were vying for pancakes, Jessica was humming something, bursting into laughter. Now there was only silence and the chill of drafts from a poorly closed window at night. Michael sat at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of cold coffee. He hardly slept a wink. He tossed and turned on the sofa for a couple of hours, falling into a heavy, restless oblivion. My head was pounding and my mouth was dry. But neither coffee nor cold water brought relief. Streaks of pale morning sun spilled across the floor. In their light, Michael noticed details that had previously been familiar and unnoticeable. Jessica's pink apron, which she had forgotten in her haste yesterday, hangs on a hook. Her favorite sweater is thrown on the back of the chair. There are traces of her presence everywhere, and at the same time, a frightening emptiness. On the table was a framed family photo. Last Christmas, all four of them smiling in front of a decorated Christmas tree. Michael, mechanically rubbing the stubble on his chin, caught the gaze of Jessica smiling in the photo and felt a pang of pain. Just a few months ago, they seemed like a happy family, and now everything has collapsed. Footsteps were heard from above. The children were waking up. Michael shook himself, trying to collect himself. He needed to cook breakfast for them, pretend that life went on, although he himself barely understood how to live on. He stood up and opened the refrigerator. On the shelf was a plate of leftover meatloaf, last night's dinner that Jessica had cooked. Michael looked away and slammed the door. Instead, he took out eggs and milk. He could make an omelet. While he was breaking eggs into a bowl, Megan appeared at the kitchen door. The daughter looked pale. There were dark circles under her eyes. It looked like she had hardly slept either. She silently sat down at the table, lowering her eyes. Then shuffling steps were heard. Josh sleepily entered the kitchen with a teddy bear in his hand. The boy looked around. Obviously something was wrong. Good morning, Michael greeted hoarsely, trying to inject cheerfulness into his voice. Will you have an omelet? Megan just shrugged. Josh rubbed his eyes. Where's Mom? He asked quietly. Michael's hands trembled, almost dropping the bowl. He glanced quickly at his son. He looked with clear blue eyes with the hope that Dad would now explain where Mom had gone. Michael coughed, trying to find the words. Mom. Left on business, he said quietly. She won't be home for a while. Josh frowned. For what reasons? She promised to take me to the park today. Michael felt a lump in his throat. He remembered they were going to go to the amusement park with the whole family this weekend. They promised the children. Another wound is unfulfilled promises. Sorry, my friend, he said quietly to his son. We won't go to the park today, but I promise we'll catch up later, okay? The boy squeezed the bear cub. His eyes sparkled. When will Mom be back? He asked stubbornly. Megan suddenly exhaled sharply, raising her head. Stop it, Josh. Her voice trembled. Mom won't come back. Megan, Michael called out sternly to her, throwing the whisk into the bowl. Josh looked from his sister to his father, dumbfounded. How is it that it won't come back? His lips trembled. Dad? Michael hurriedly approached and knelt down in front of his son, being on the same level with him. Listen to me, he spoke softly, placing his hands on Josh's thin shoulders. Mom is not at home right now, but she loves you very much. Both me and Megan. It's just, adults sometimes quarrel, and they need to live separately to sort it out. He felt his voice treacherously weakening, but forced himself to speak confidently. It's not your fault, okay? It's not your fault. Both your mother and I love you very much. Josh's eyes filled with tears. But will she come back? He whispered. I hope, Michael answered evasively, unable to utter a lie or the truth. In the meantime, you and my sister and I can handle it ourselves. We're a team, right? Josh silently threw himself on his neck and began to sob. Michael squeezed his son in his arms, closing his eyes. There was a sniffling sound behind her. Megan was also crying, turning away. For several minutes, the three of them simply sat, huddled closely together. Michael stroked his son's back and squeezed his daughter's hand with his other hand. My heart was breaking with pain for the children. He whispered, I'm with you, I'm not going anywhere. We will overcome everything together. When the storm of tears subsided a little, Michael wiped the children's faces with a napkin and persuaded Josh to eat at least a couple of spoons of the omelet. The boy was nodding off from lack of sleep and general despondency. Megan refused to eat, only drank the cooled tea in small sips. What will happen now, Dad? She asked quietly when Josh, tired of crying, went into the living room to watch cartoons on TV. Michael sat down wearily on a chair next to his daughter. He wanted to say encouraging words, but he himself did not know the future. I don't know, honey, he answered honestly. We'll manage somehow. I guess my mom and I will have to file for a divorce. The word hung like a heavy weight. Megan winced as if the taste was bitter. I hate her, she suddenly said sharply, clenching her fists. How could she do this to us? Don't say that. She's still your mother, Michael gently tried to reason, although deep down he himself experienced similar feelings. Mom wouldn't leave her children for some rich man, Megan shouted, standing up. This means she is not our mother anymore. Michael wanted to object, but restrained himself. He understood his daughter's pain, her resentment. He couldn't stop her from feeling this. Instead, he stood up too and hugged her, pulling her towards him. Megan tensed at first, but then went limp, pressing her forehead to his shoulder. She doesn't need us. The girl whispered, pain and anger rang in her voice. What should we do? She needs you, Michael said firmly. She's worried now too, believe me. She's just confused, but I'm sure she still loves you. Megan didn't answer, just silently buried herself in her father. So they stood in the middle of the kitchen, father and daughter, trying to share their grief with each other. Before noon, when the sun rose high, Michael tried to keep the children busy. He understood that it was dangerous to let them sit and suffer, especially Megan, who could withdraw into herself. Therefore, he convinced her to help him clean the house, saying that he needed to prepare the living room for Uncle Tom's arrival in the evening to watch football. Although he had not yet agreed on Tom, the idea came spontaneously. Josh was tasked with collecting the toys scattered around the house and putting them in boxes. Simple work distracted me a little from gloomy thoughts. While cleaning the bedroom, Megan came across her mother's half-empty closet. Jessica, in a hurry, took only one suitcase of things. The rest was left hanging. Shirts, dresses, her signature scent that permeated the fabric. Megan, sensing the smell of perfume, suddenly rushed out of the room, putting her hand to her mouth so as not to scream. Michael found her in the bathroom, where her daughter was sobbing silently. He only hugged her tighter and silently stroked her head, letting her cry. He himself wanted to howl in pain, but he could not lose heart for the sake of the children. When it became a little cleaner after cleaning and the children calmed down, a tired silence hung in the house. Josh fell asleep on the couch with his bear, exhausted by emotions. Megan went to her room, saying that she wanted to read, although she would rather just be alone. Michael sat on the porch outside so as not to disturb the sleepers. The yard was quiet. The neighbors' children had probably left for the weekend or had not yet gone out for a walk. The sunny and warm spring day seemed to mock his grief. He took out his phone. There are several missed calls and messages on the screen. 2 from Tom and even 1 from a neighbor, Mr. Hanson, who usually didn't write. It seems that rumors have already spread, or, more likely, Jessica herself told her friend Liz, Tom's wife, about what happened. Michael sighed heavily. He didn't want to talk to anyone, but he understood that it was impossible not to answer his friends. They were worried, and perhaps help would not hurt him. He felt his hands shaking violently as he opened the messages. From Thomas. Mike, Liz said Jessica left. How are you? I'm worried. Answer me. Second, my friend, if you need anything, I'm here. Let me know. Michael closed his eyes, feeling grateful for such a friend. Tom and Liz are their neighbors across the house and have been family friends for many years. The children often played together. Of course, Liz was Jessica's best friend. Most likely Jess called or texted her. Just thinking about it, that Jessica might be justifying her actions to her friend made Michael's stomach turn. He dialed Tom's number. He answered almost immediately. Mike, God, finally. I'm calling you. You're not answering. How are you, buddy? Tom's voice was excited. Michael realized that he didn't know what to say to that common, how are you question. I don't know, Tom. He breathed honestly. It could have been better. At the other end of the line, the friend sighed heavily. Damn. Liz said Jessica moved on with someone else. This is true. Is it true? Michael shuddered, saying it out loud. It's all true. Tom was silent for a few seconds, then cursed quietly. God. Look, Mike, I don't even know what to say. Liz and I are completely dumbfounded. How are you holding up? Michael looked back at the house where the children were sleeping. I'm holding on for the sake of the children. They feel very bad. He himself was surprised at how evenly his voice sounded, as if he was talking about something ordinary. Jess, she left at night. Hasn't appeared yet. Bastard, Tom sighed emotionally. Sorry, but there's no other way to say it. How could she leave you like that? Okay, listen, let Liz and I come now. We will help as much as we can. No need, Tom. Michael hastily objected. Thanks, but no need now. The children just fell asleep, and so did I. I still don't believe that this is all reality. Understand? Tom drawled, although he could hardly understand completely. But remember, we are close. If you need to sit with the guys or anything else, contact me at any time, okay? Thank you, Michael said sincerely. Tom paused and asked softly, did she make herself known? She said she would call today to explain everything to the children, Michael answered bitterly. But for now, there is silence. She probably doesn't care. Damn it. Tom swore again. Listen, maybe you should unwind a little. Let's come in this evening, have a beer and watch the match. Or we'll come to you, whichever is more convenient. Children can draw with Amy if necessary. Amy, his and Liz's daughter, the same age as Josh, often played with him. But Michael was not sure that the children would benefit from someone else's company now. I don't know, Tom, he said tiredly. I will think. Thanks for the invitation. Fine. We'll still be home in the evening. If anything, just come, Tom insisted. And hang in there, brother. You are strong. You can handle it. We are all for you. Michael thanked him again and ended the call. He looked at the phone, the screen of which reflected his haggard face. You are strong, Tom said, and he felt weak and broken. Then the phone vibrated in my hand, highlighting a new call. Jessica herself called. His chest felt tight. Michael didn't even immediately press the receive button. He was silent for several seconds, not knowing where to start the conversation. Finally, he said quietly, Yes? An uncertain voice was heard on the line. Mike, it's me. He recognized her voice, so familiar and now painfully alien. He didn't answer, waiting for him to continue. I'm sorry it didn't happen right away. Jessica began nervously. Are you? How are you doing? How are the children? Michael was overwhelmed with indignation. What do you think? He broke out more sharply than he wanted. How can there be children when their mother left without explanation? There was silence on the line, then Jessica sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I... I wanted to talk to them myself. Can I come? He closed his eyes, holding back his emotions. I don't know if you should show up now. Megan is very angry, Jess. On the other end, Jessica began to cry quietly. For several seconds, only her attempts to pull herself together could be heard. I understand, but I have to. At least try to explain to them. Please. Michael glanced at the door. It was quiet inside the house. Cold, he exhaled. Come if you want. Just, I don't know what will come of it. After a while, I will, she muttered and passed out. Michael held the phone to his ear for a few more moments, listening to the silence after the call. Then he got up heavily and went into the house. He carefully woke up Josh, who was snoring sweetly on the couch. The boy opened his eyes. Dad, is Mom still not there? He asked. No, Michael stroked his head. But she will come to talk to us soon. Get dressed, okay? The son's face brightened. Will Mom come? Is it true? Yes, Michael smiled sadly. She won't be long. To explain everything. Josh jumped up and ran to his room to change clothes. Michael heard the door to his room slam and turned around to see Megan standing on the stairs, looking down warily. Is Mom coming? She asked quietly. Yes, the father nodded. He'll be here in an hour. I thought it would be better if she personally. Better for her, Megan said with contempt, to ease your conscience. Michael sighed heavily. Maggie, I'm not defending anyone, but you still need to listen to her. She is your mother, after all. The daughter squeezed the railing. Her gaze was burning. Okay, I'll listen, but I can't promise that I can hold back. Just be honest, he nodded sadly. Keeping it to yourself is worse. 40 minutes later, trying to gather his courage, Michael saw a familiar silver BMW pull up near the house, apparently this same Richard's car. His heart sank with painful foreboding. He stood at the living room window and watched as Jessica got out of the car. She was dressed in a beige raincoat, carefully smoothed her hair. Even from a distance, it was noticeable that her eyes were red. Michael took a deep breath, gathering his strength. A second later, the doorbell rang. He went to open it, preparing for a difficult conversation. Michael opened the door, letting Jessica in. She walked into the hallway and stopped awkwardly when she saw the children. Hello, my dear, she began quietly, trying to smile. Josh, unable to bear it, slipped out from under his sister's arm and rushed to his mother. Mother, he screamed. Jessica crouched down and hugged her son, bursting into tears. My baby, I miss you so much, she whispered, stroking his back. Michael and Megan stood a little further away. The daughter's face was cold and tense. When Jessica, having released her son, carefully stood up and stepped towards her, Megan pulled away. Maggie, the mother began softly. Don't call me that, Megan snapped, crossing her arms over her chest. Tears flashed in her eyes, although her voice sounded angry. Jessica turned pale. Sorry, Megan, she faltered, not knowing how to continue. Let's sit down, Michael suggested quietly, pointing to the living room. Everyone moved there. Michael and the children sat down on the sofa. Jessica sat down in the chair opposite. There was awkward silence for several moments. Finally, Jessica said quietly, folding her trembling hands in her lap. I know I have let you down greatly, and now it's probably difficult for you to even look at me. Her voice broke, but she continued, but you have the right to know the truth. Justice? Megan asked sharply. What other truth? Why did you exchange us for someone else's uncle with money? We already know. Megan, Michael said tiredly. Jessica lowered her head, hiding her tears. You're right, I deserve it, she whispered. I have no forgiveness for what I did, but I want you to understand that I love you children very much. I'm not leaving you, it just so happened that I need to leave my dad. Why? Josh said, looking her straight in the eyes. You love Dad. Why can't you be with us? Jessica began to sob again. Sorry, baby. I... I'm confused. This isn't about you or Megan, and not in Dad as such. She tried to find words. It's hard to explain. I just became unhappy and made a mistake. A very big mistake. Megan breathed heavily, holding back her emotions. So come back, she suddenly said. If you realize that you made a mistake, stay home. Jessica shook her head, swallowing back tears. It's not that simple. I've already made a choice, and I have to bear the consequences. Your dad. She looked at Michael, full of prayer. He will never be able to forgive me. Michael remained silent, looking down. He didn't want to discuss their relationship in front of the children now. And rightly so, Megan said firmly. You can't forgive after something like this. Josh suddenly rushed to his mother again, hugging her. Mommy, don't go away, he sobbed. Please, we will be good, honestly. Michael's heart sank. His son thought it was their fault. Jessica hugged the boy, choking on her own tears. Josh, honey, no. You are good. You are not to blame for anything. It's just that Mom has to live separately now. But I promise you will see me often. Do you want us to go to the park tomorrow as planned? I'll come get you. Josh wiped his nose on his sleeve. Is it true? He brightened at a glance. Is it true? She confirmed, stroking his cheek. Megan can be with us tomorrow if she wants. She looked pleadingly at her daughter. Don't want, she snapped. Jessica nodded sadly. Fine. Then I'll pick Joshua up in the morning, okay? She addressed her last words to Michael. He just nodded. All this was very difficult for him, and he was afraid to break down. It's better to let him see his son, especially since he wants it himself. After talking a little more painful apologies and promises, Jessica realized that Megan was not in the mood to make peace right now. She hugged the children one by one, kissed Josh, and gently touched Megan's shoulder. Then she stood up. I'll come whenever you want, okay? She said quietly. And you can come to me at any time. I will live with. With Richard. There is always a room for you there if you want to visit. These words sounded uncertain. The children were silent, clearly not eager to be in someone else's house. Okay, let's see. Michael intervenes to break the silence. I don't think it's worth imposing this on now. Give them time. Jessica nodded, lowering her head. Of course, time. She headed into the hallway. Michael saw her off. At the door, she suddenly touched his hand with a light gesture. Mike. She began quietly. He froze, tensed internally, expecting another apology. Thank you. For not completely turning them against me, Jessica exhaled, looking into his eyes. I know I ruined everything, but at least they listened to you, and I'm glad that they are with you. You are a wonderful father. Michael had a lump in his throat and couldn't answer. He simply took a step back, looking down. Jessica stood there for a moment, as if waiting for something else, but Michael remained silent. Then she said quietly, I'll come by in a couple of days to pick up my things, and opened the door. A minute later, the silver car drove off, taking Jessica away. Michael closed the door and leaned his forehead against it, closing his eyes. He survived this difficult conversation for the sake of the children. But as soon as she left, his strength left him. He wanted to break something, scream, throw out the pain, but instead he forced himself to return to the guys. Megan was still sitting there on the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Josh stood next to him, patting his sister on the back. Don't cry, Maggie, he persuaded. Mom promised to come. We'll go to the park tomorrow. Megan lowered her hands. Her face was wet. She ruined everything, Josh. This can't be fixed. Josh frowned in confusion. But she loves us. Love? The sister repeated bitterly. If I loved you, I would stay. And so, he just says that he loves us so that we don't get offended. Michael sat down next to him and put his arm around both of them. We need to learn to live on in a new way. It was hard for him to say this, but he tried to hold on. But I promise one thing, I will always be there. You are my most valuable asset. I'm ready to do anything for you. Megan leaned against her father on one side, Josh on the other. They sat like that for a long time, hugging each other on the sofa, finding comfort in each other's proximity. Michael looked out the window, beyond which stretched their quiet suburb, bathed in the spring sun. Life went on, and he firmly decided, despite all the pain, he would fight for the happiness of his children and his own. Somewhere deep under the oppressive melancholy, a strong determination stirred. A month has passed. The May rain drummed on the roof of the garage, mixing with the noise of the running engine. Michael learned under the hood of an old pickup truck, trying to concentrate on the repairs. Oil stained his hands, sweat appeared on his forehead, the usual work usually calmed him. But not today. "Hey, Mike, how are you there?" The head of the workshop, Mr. Dawson, called to him from the door. Michael straightened up and wiped his hands with a rag. "Almost finished, sir. All that remains is to install new spark plugs." "Well, look, the client will come in an hour," Dawson nodded, and, after hesitating, added more softly, "And hang in there, son. If there is anything, tell me. We can relieve you of the workload a little." Michael nodded gratefully. Dawson was an old friend of his father's and knew the situation. After Jessica left, Michael threw himself into work, partly to provide for his family, partly as a distraction. He agreed to extra shifts and orders. Dawson was afraid that he would overstrain himself, but Michael assured him that everything was fine. "In fact, work helped me not to think." The hardest moments came at home, when Josh fell asleep and silence filled the house. Then the memories and pain came flooding back. But during the day, among the nuts and carburetors, there was no time to mope. Having completed the pickup, Michael closed the hood and turned off the engine. He wiped his forehead and looked at his watch. It was almost 5 in the evening. It was time to close. After exchanging his dirty robe for a clean jacket, he picked up his phone, checking his messages. As usual, a couple of SMS from Megan. "Dad, I'll pick Josh up from aftercare, don't worry." And later, "We're at home, heating up the casserole." Michael smiled warmly. The 15-year-old daughter has recently taken on a lot of care around the house and about her brother, as if trying to fill her mother's place. He was eternally grateful to her, but also worried. Megan had to grow up too soon. He replied, "You are great. I'm going home," and threw the bag of tools into the trunk of his old Ford. At home, a warming picture awaited him. Dinner was steaming on the kitchen table, a reheated potato casserole, cooked the other day with his neighbor Liz. She came several times to help cook for the whole week. There were children sitting at the table, Josh, smeared with sauce, and Megan, smiling tiredly at him. "Hello, family." Michael kissed his son and daughter on the tops of their heads in turn, sitting down. "How was your day?" "Norm," Josh shrugged, putting a huge piece of casserole into his mouth. "Mr. Parson praised my drawing about space." "Great," Michael ruffled his hair. "What about you, Maggie? How's school?" "Ordinary day," she answered briefly, avoiding his gaze. Michael knew that things weren't going well for her at school. After the divorce, Megan became withdrawn and her grades dropped. Teachers expressed concern. He was already thinking about enrolling her in seeing a psychologist, but his daughter protested furiously when she heard such a proposal. "I had to rely on time and home support." However, over the past month, she has gotten a little better. In any case, she started going to dance classes again, a hobby that she had been passionate about before all the events. Over dinner, they talked about trifles. Josh chatted about his school friend, with whom he was building a secret headquarters out of branches. Michael told a funny story from the workshop when a client tried to fix a car himself and brought extra parts. Megan was mostly silent, but listened with a slight smile. Michael was pleased to see at least a shadow of his former daughter, the cheerful, talkative girl she used to be. After dinner, he helped the children with their homework. Megan coped with math on her own, but Josh had to be tormented with reading. The second grader was not good at long words. When, to his father's delight, Josh finally completed a whole paragraph of the story, Michael praised him and put him to bed. Megan went home under the pretext of finishing some more homework. Michael understood that she just needed personal space. He tiredly cleared the table and washed the dishes. At about 9 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang. Drying his hands with a towel, Michael went to open it. Tom stood on the porch with 6 cans of beer in his hands. Surprise, the neighbor smiled. I thought you wouldn't mind having a drink in good company. Michael couldn't help but smile. Come in, since you came yourself. I must admit, I wanted to call you over the weekend, but I never got around to it. He motioned for his friend to come inside. Tom walked into the kitchen, sitting down at the table. Michael took a couple of glasses from the cabinet. How are you there? Tom asked, watching Michael pour the amber liquid into mugs. Slowly, Michael answered, handing him a beer. During the day, everything is fine. I'm working. The guys are at school. Evenings are sometimes hard, but we got used to it. Tom nodded understandingly and raised his mug. Well, we'll get used to it, and for the future to only get better. Michael clinked his glass and took a sip. The cold, bitter beer pleasantly refreshed my throat. They drank in silence for several minutes. How are the children holding up? Tom asked, breaking the silence. Liz was chatting with them the other day, seemed okay. Josh is almost back to normal, Michael answered, spinning his mug. Small, short memory. Only sometimes he asks when Mom will return home to live. He smiled bitterly. I tell him that I don't know. Maybe he understands, he just hopes. And Megan? The friend asked softly. Michael shook his head. It's the hardest for her. She gets angry and withdraws. He still hardly talks to his mother, neither on the phone nor in person. And Jessica is trying to sort of fix things. He noticed how he clenched his fists at her name and forced himself to unclench. Every weekend he takes Josh somewhere, to the park, to the cinema. Megan is not going. I don't insist. I don't want to put pressure. Is Jessica still with that guy? Tom said with hostility. Michael nodded, taking a sip of his beer. Yes, apparently he lives with him. The house outside the city, according to Josh, is huge. He grinned. The boy was impressed, of course. The swimming pool, its own cinema room. Well, yes, you can't buy children. Tom shook his head. And you're right not forcing them to go to her. Megan will decide for herself when she is ready. I just spoke with our lawyer yesterday, Michael said after a pause, turning the conversation to practical matters. He's filing divorce papers. I think we'll officially finish everything in a month or two. He paused. Jessica, by the way, refused our house. Leave it to us. Apparently, everything is fine with his housing. She doesn't need it. Well, at least something reasonable, Tom sighed. I didn't expect this from her. Before, she seemed quite down to earth, but here it was as if she had replaced her. Michael just smiled sadly. I didn't expect it either, but apparently he didn't know her completely. He looked at his friend. Thank you for coming. I myself would probably sit staring at the TV and suffer from thoughts, and so I got distracted. Tom patted him on the shoulder. Rest assured, we will not abandon you. And don't you dare move away, otherwise I'll drag you here by force. They drank more beer, moving on to lighter topic: sports, news in the area. About an hour later, Tom took his leave so as not to keep his friend late. Having seen him off, Michael returned to the living room. The gaze fell on the piano in the corner. It was rarely opened. Jessica used to love playing old tunes on it in the evenings. Now the instrument stood silently, covered in dust. Michael walked over, sat down on the stool, and lifted the key cover. He ran his fingers over the familiar keyboard and pressed a couple of notes. A quiet sound echoed under the arch of the room. Once upon a time, he knew how to play a little. Jessica taught him a few simple things. He remembered how fun it was to sing Christmas carols with her children to her accompaniment. Now it was remembered as someone else's life. Michael sighed, removed his hands, and closed the piano. It still hurts too much. Getting up, he went out onto the porch. The rain had already stopped. The air was fresh, the smell of wet earth and lilacs that grew near the fence. The warm spring evening enveloped me in soft darkness. Michael sat down on the porch step, looking thoughtfully at the faint light of the street lamp. He thought about the summer ahead, the first summer without Jessica. We'll have to keep the kids occupied during the holidays. Maybe send Josh to a day camp at school, take Megan to the lake where they used to vacation as a family. If she wants, of course. And he also thought about himself. When Tom said, "We won't leave you," Michael realized that he was largely supported by the support of his friends and his love for his children. But he himself also needs to move on with his life, not only to work and fulfill parental duties, but also to somehow recover mentally. So far, he could not imagine a new personal life. The wound was fresh. But more and more often, waking up in a cold, empty bed, he caught himself with a terrible longing for female warmth, by simple human warmth nearby. He pushed those thoughts away as he stood up. It's too early to think about new happiness. First children, their well-being, and then, maybe, something will work out for yourself. At least he no longer felt crushed as in the first days. Life went on, and he was able to cope alone. Tonight with Tom reminded me once again, he is not alone. The front door creaked behind me. Megan looked out onto the porch in her pajamas. "Dad, why don't you go to bed?" she asked. "Everything is fine?" Michael smiled at his daughter. "Yes, just getting some air. Go to bed, honey, it's late." Megan came out and sat quietly next to her father on the step. "I heard you and Uncle Tom were talking," she began after a pause. "About Mom." Michael tensed, looking at his daughter. Megan picked at a hole in the wooden step with her finger without taking her eyes off the floor. "What exactly did you hear?" he asked softly. "She lives with that man in a big house," Megan said quietly, "and that you are getting a divorce." Michael sighed. "Yes, that's true. Sorry, I won't." The daughter shook her head. "Don't apologize. I understood everything. Just." She bit her lip. "It still hurts." He put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. "I know, dear. It hurts me too. But this is probably the best solution. Living a lie would be even worse." Megan nodded, clinging to him. They sat in silence for several minutes, looking at the night sky. Then she asked quietly, "Do you hate her?" Michael thought about it. Hatred? He was furious, offended, crushed, but to call it hatred. Probably not. "Don't know," he answered honestly. "I often want to hate. But so far it's only possible." He looked for the word. "To be sad." Megan nodded understandingly. "It's the same for me." She wiped a tear from her eyelashes. "I'm angry, but I'm even more sad. For those times when everything was normal. For my mother, who was good." Michael patted her on the head. "That Mom hasn't gone anywhere. She's still the same inside. I was just wrong. You and I don't have to forgive her right now. But maybe someday." Megan didn't answer. After a while, she said quietly, "I'm scared, Dad. What happens next? Suddenly you too." She hesitated. He turned her face towards him. "Hey, what nonsense is this?" He smiled softly. "I'm not going anywhere, I promise. And I won't let you go anywhere, okay? You, Josh, and I are a team." She smiled weakly in response and buried her head in his shoulder. Michael felt relieved. For the first time in a long time, Megan spoke openly about her feelings. This was a step forward. Soon he sent his daughter to bed and went to bed himself. At night, for the first time, he dreamed not of Jessica leaving, but of something else, as if he was walking along the shore of a lake with children, and there was a woman next to them. He did not see her face, but he felt kindness and warmth from her. Waking up, Michael looked at the ceiling for a long time, remembering this feeling, and thought, is the heart already dreaming of new love while the mind is not yet ready? He didn't know the answer, but somewhere in the depths of their souls, a spark of hope barely smoldered that happiness was still waiting for their family, albeit changed ahead. The wide windows of the mansion overlooked a serene lake, along the surface of which reflections of the evening lights slid. Jessica stood by the glass, wrapping her arms around herself. Behind her, in the spacious living room, classical music was playing quietly, echoing emptily throughout the luxurious rooms. It's been 2 months since she moved in with Richard. 2 months in a completely different life, the life I once dreamed of. A big house, an expensive car, no household routine. The housekeeper comes to clean and prepare dinner. Richard generously showered her with gifts, jewelry, branded clothing. In the first weeks, my head was spinning from new impressions. trips to boutiques, private shows, restaurants with world-class chefs. But the longer this shine lasted, the more clearly Jessica felt the emptiness inside, especially in the evenings when Richard was late at work or went on business trips, and she was left alone in the huge house, like now. She glanced at her watch, 9:30 p.m. Richard promised to be there for dinner an hour ago, but he called that he was delayed at a meeting with investors. He asked me not to wait, so Jessica ate alone at a long oak table set for two, across from an empty seat. The food was delicious, but seemed tasteless. And now she stood at the window, looking at the water. Somewhere far away in the city, in a nice, modest house that had recently been her home, the children had probably already gone to bed, without a goodnight kiss from Mom. Since she left, Jessica hasn't laid Megan or Josh down even once. It was her own decision and her payback. Jessica smiled sadly at her thoughts. Payback, she now understood the price of her action. Every day began with a pang of conscience when looking at the phone. What if Megan wrote? No, Megan never wrote. Only sometimes emojis came from Josh or his photo. Michael did that, she knew. He tried to keep them in touch. Jessica sat down heavily in a leather chair by the window and took her phone from the table. The screen displayed a recent photo, Josh smiling without a front tooth. The baby's tooth had fallen out, and next to it a sweet note from him. Mom, look, my tooth has fallen out. Is the tooth fairy coming? The photo arrived in the morning, but Jessica couldn't find the strength to respond all day. Now I typed, how big you are already. You have an adult smile. Of course the fairy will come. I kiss you, my dear. After sending it, I remembered how I used to hide a coin under my pillow at night. Now Michael has probably taken on this role. My heart sank. She opened another correspondence with Megan. Her last messages, 2 weeks ago, a dry reply to a request to meet, don't want, leave me alone. Pain instantly echoed in my chest. Megan basically did not communicate. Even when Jessica came to pick up Josh, her daughter either went for a walk or locked herself in the room. On those rare occasions when they had to meet face to face, Megan looked right through her, as if she were passing by. Jessica understood that she deserved this mistrust, but that doesn't make it any easier. She missed her daughter terribly, their girlish conversations in the kitchen, their joint choice of outfits, the way Megan made funny faces, copying her classmates. The phone suddenly vibrated in her hand, revealing the caller's name, Liz. Jessica jumped in surprise, then hurriedly accepted the challenge. Hello, she said quietly. Hello, Jess. The friend's voice sounded restrained. How are you? Liz was perhaps the only one who continued to communicate with her from her previous life. Other acquaintances, both relatives and colleagues, condemned her action openly or behind her back. Liz, although she did not hide her disappointment, still did not turn away completely. She called once a week to inquire about her affairs. Fine, Jessica answered uncertainty. And you? How's Amy? Everything is fine, Liz responded. Listen, I'm calling about this. Michael and I ran into each other today. He brought Josh to play with Amy. She fell silent for a second. He said he was going to take the kids to Lake Brighton for the weekend. Do you remember you used to go there in the summer? Of course Jessica remembered. A small house by the lake, which was rented for several years in a raw silence, pine trees and water. Their favorite place. Yes, I remember, she exhaled. Are they going? Together? Alone? Yes, Liz confirmed. They want to change the situation and relax. I thought, maybe you'd like to drive up there. Meet children in an informal setting. They will be next to our holiday home, so we can come up with something. Jessica's heart rate increased. Megan agreed to go. She asked the first thing that came to mind. Yeah, Michael said that she suddenly expressed a desire. Liz answered softly. He probably misses those times. My friend didn't finish. Jessica's heart sank painfully. Megan agreed to go, which means the child is looking for solace in the past. And Dad will be there, and her mother will not be there. I don't know, Liz. Jessica began, but her friend interrupted her. You don't have to, of course. I just thought you might want to. I can help arrange everything. For example, we will accidentally end up next to each other on the beach, and you can just say hello and talk. No pressure. Maybe Megan will accept you more easily in nature. Jessica closed her eyes. The setting is by the lake. The children are in a good mood. This is a chance. But she was afraid. I was afraid to see hatred in my daughter's eyes again, or, even worse, indifference. I will think, she said quietly. Thank you for saying that. Fine, Liz responded. Hang in there, okay? And if anything happens, call. They said goodbye. Jessica hung up the phone, lost in thought. If she decides to go, how will Richard react? She heard the front door open. Richard is back. Jessica stood up to meet him. A tall man in his 40s, in an expensive suit, with a briefcase in his hand, entered the living room. He looked tired but happy. Sorry, darling, that it's so late, he said, walking up and kissing her on the cheek. He smelled of whiskey and expensive cologne. We were delayed, but the deal is almost in our pocket. I saved you dinner if you want. Jessica smiled, helping him take off his jacket. Thank you. Although after all the toasts I was full of snacks, to be honest, he grinned. But I will not refuse your concern. They went into the kitchen. While Jessica was heating up the food, Richard poured himself some mineral water and, sitting down at the high bar table, asked, How was your day? What did you do? Yes, I read around the house a little, she answered, putting stewed vegetables on a plate. Did you go to the spa? He clarified casually. No, I didn't want it today, she shook her head. Richard looked at her intently. Are you sad again? You promised not to be locked up. Let's go somewhere together tomorrow, huh? To a club or to an exhibition. Otherwise, you are alone all day. There was genuine concern in his voice. Richard tried to entertain her as best he could. But Jessica understood. He did not fully understand the depth of her melancholy. She placed a plate in front of him. Okay, let's go somewhere tomorrow, she said quietly. Richard began to eat. Both were silent for some time. Jessica decided to broach the topic. You know, Michael's taking the kids to the lake for the weekend, she began carefully. To the same place where we went before. Richard glanced at her quickly. Oh yeah, well, sounds like fun to them. I thought, maybe I should go there for a day too. Meet them by chance, talk, she said, uncertainty, looking at his reaction. Richard's face darkened slightly. Are you sure this is a good idea? He asked. Your daughter, as far as I know, still does not want to communicate with you. Wouldn't it be intrusive? Jessica lowered her eyes. Perhaps, but I have to try. I feel like I'm losing Megan. Richard put down his fork. Jess, honey, you know everything will work out in time. Give her time. Otherwise, you can only make things worse if she perceives your arrival as an invasion. He spoke evenly and reasonably, but Jessica suddenly felt irritated. How much time? She asked quietly. 2 months have already passed. She hates me. I'm afraid that every day it becomes easier for her to live without me, and in the end, she won't need me at all. These are your fears, Richard objected, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Believe me, daughters always need their mothers. She's just offended now. But isn't Michael doing a good job? She's under his care. Don't worry so much. Jessica swallowed. Of course, Michael copes. She never doubted that he was a wonderful father. But for some reason, hearing this from Richard stung. It's easier said than done for me. Don't worry, she said with difficulty. I haven't really seen my daughter for 2 months. What if I lose her? Richard sighed, stood up and put his arm around Jessica's shoulders. You won't lose, he said confidently. She is a teenager, stubborn, but blood is not water. And now the main thing is to improve our lives. We can't look back all the time. He pulled back slightly and looked into her face. We have a wonderful future ahead of us, don't we? Jessica tried to smile in response to his warm gaze. She knew that Richard loved her in his own way. He wanted to make her happy, give her everything she wanted, except for one thing, her past family. Is it true? She answered quietly, accepting his care. Sorry that I'm talking about sad things again. Well, if you want, go to the lake, he suddenly said, stroking her hand. I don't prohibit it, of course. Just be ready for anything. Maybe they won't be happy, or maybe vice versa. If you want, go. Only I will be away, so I will have to be alone. Jessica wasn't particularly happy about the resolution, but she appreciated that he was not pressuring. When are you leaving? She asked. On Friday morning, for 3 days, Richard answered. Business forum in Chicago. I called you, but you didn't want to. Maybe it's true that it's better to go and get some air by the lake. You'll get divorced. Jessica nodded. Hope stirred in my soul. What if out there, in nature, they would really be able to, if not make peace with Megan, then at least talk? Richard put the dishes in the sink and stretched. I'm exhausted, he said, hugging her waist. I'll go take a shower and sleep. Are you with me? Go. I'll be a little later, she smiled tiredly. I want to sit a little longer. Richard nodded understandingly, kissed her temple, and went upstairs. When his footsteps died away, Jessica sank back into the chair by the window. She looked at the phone, no more messages. On the other hand, everyone at home was probably asleep. She imagined Michael now, perhaps reading in bed or dozing in front of the TV. How Megan curled up under her green blanket, her favorite fleece one that Jessica gave her. How Josh stretched out in his sleep, hugging a teddy bear, a toy from her, his mother, for his last birthday. Tears came to my throat. She raised her hand to hold back her sobs. One uncontrollable tear rolled down her cheek. What have I done? Jessica thought for the 100th time. Yes, she has a loving man, wealth, and comfort. But the most precious things remained there, on the other side of the lake, her children, her past. It seemed to her that she was balancing between two lives and did not belong to either. In the new one, she felt like a stranger, unnecessary, just a beautiful addition to Richard's interior. In the old one, she exiled herself, betraying the trust of her loved ones. Jessica closed her eyes. I need to sleep. Tomorrow is a new day. But she knew that she would not fall asleep soon. As had often happened in recent weeks, she would most likely lie next to the peacefully sleeping Richard, looking at the ceiling and mentally turning over the memories of her former life. Jessica stood up and headed upstairs, passing mirrors and paintings in the dim light of the night lights. She suddenly remembered. Before, when she went to bed, she always checked if the window in Josh's room was closed, tucked the blanket under him, and then kissed Megan, even if she pretended to be asleep. These little rituals of motherhood had once bored her, and now she would give anything to have them back. It's okay, I deserve this pain, she thought as she entered the cool, luxurious bedroom, more like a hotel room. Richard was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at something on his tablet. Seeing her, he smiled. Are you going to bed? He asked quietly. Jessica nodded, trying to appear calm. She lay down next to her, and he hugged her, turning off the lamp. His body was warm and reliable, but Jessica could not warm her soul. She lay there, feeling his steady breathing, and looked into the darkness. A plan for a trip to the lake was already brewing in her head. Maybe at least there she can be one step closer to regaining her daughter's lost trust. Or at least just to see her laughing, splashing happily in the water reminiscent of the girl she was before all these mistakes. With these thoughts, under the quiet snoring of Richard, Jessica fell asleep unnoticed, feeling a tiny spark of hope in her heart for the first time in a long time. The summer sun shone dazzlingly on the waves of Lake Brighton. Michael squinted, sitting on the old wooden dock, and watched as Josh splashed into the water with a squeal from a short run. The water splashed in all directions, and Megan, who was standing knee-deep by the shore, stumbled back, laughing. Josh, you got me all wet, she shouted indignantly, but cheerfully. Sorry, the boy shouted, surfacing and snorting joyfully. It was clear that his apology was not very sincere. He was filled with amusement. Megan, grinning, scooped up water with her palms and splashed it towards her brother. He laughed, swimming away. Michael watched the children with quiet joy. They arrived at the lake yesterday, Friday evening, and at first Megan was a little tense. Apparently memories came flooding back. But this morning, as soon as they went to the beach, her daughter seemed to have lifted a load. She smiled, fooled around with Josh, and for the first time in a long time looked truly carefree. Michael was happy to see this. Just yesterday, while walking with the children along the shore, he cautiously asked Megan whether it was hard for her here. She answered, looking at the sunset sky, "It's hard, but also good at the same time. I love this place, so many great memories." He then put his arm around her shoulders, and they continued to walk in silence, each with their own thoughts. This morning they swam, had pancakes for breakfast in a small cafe near the road, and after lunch returned to the beach. Tom and Liz, as it turned out, were also here in their house nearby, and managed to drop by in the morning to say hello. Tom invited Michael to go fishing at dawn the next day, and Liz invited the children to a barbecue in the evening with their daughter Amy. Michael gratefully accepted the invitation. The children always got along with Amy, and Megan could use some communication with someone her own age. "Dad, why aren't you swimming?" Josh called, swimming up to the pier. "The water is warm. Now, I'll rest a little and come in," Michael responded. He had just pulled a small boat ashore. He and Josh were riding along the shore. The boy was tired of rowing, and they decided to take a break. Megan, meanwhile, climbed onto the dock and sat down next to her father, dangling her wet legs. "It's good here," she said, looking at the blue distance of the lake. "Very," Michael agreed, touching her on the shoulder. "Glad you went." Megan nodded. For some time they sat in pleasant silence, listening to the cries of seagulls and the splashing of water. "Let's roast marshmallows on the fire in the evening," Michael suggested. "Do you remember how it used to be?" Megan smiled at the corner of her lips. "I remember. Then I burned everything. My marshmallows fell into the fire, and my mother laughed and said that it was even tastier this way." Her smile wavered at the word mother. Michael squeezed her hand gently. "Well, this time I'll help. Let's be more careful." She looked at him gratefully. Then suddenly she said, "Dad, last night, Liz told me that Mom could come here too." Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Yes, she mentioned something like that, but I don't know if she made up her mind. I haven't seen her here." Megan lowered her head. "I was afraid all night that she would show up and ruin everything. And in the morning I woke up and looked, she was gone, and it had become so easy." She paused. "This is bad, right? That I feel better without her." Michael sighed. "No, not bad. This is fine. You want to rest, gain strength. You still love her. It's just that it hurts you now, so you don't want to see her." Megan rubbed the edge of her t-shirt. "Probably. I just thought, what if she comes after all?" The girl looked around anxiously, as if expecting to see a familiar silhouette. The lake was quite crowded, families with children, couples, some frying meat on portable grills. Michael didn't notice anyone like Jessica. He hugged his daughter by the shoulders. "I don't think it will be resolved without warning. But even if it appears, don't be afraid. I'm here to protect you, okay?" Megan nodded and, after thinking for a moment, pressed her cheek against his shoulder for a second. "Thank you, Dad." In the distance, Josh took a running jump into the water again, racing with other children. The spray reached almost to the pier. Megan and Michael laughed, shielding themselves with their hands. "Well, let's go take a dip," Michael suggested cheerfully, getting up and taking off his t-shirt. "Went." The daughter agreed, also standing up. They dived almost simultaneously, racing to catch up with Josh. He swam away from them with a joyful squeal. There was laughter and splashing for a moment. All three forgot about all their problems, existing only on this sunny day, warm water, and the cycle of happiness. In the evening, as agreed, they went to Liz and Tom for a barbecue. Crispy sausages, grilled corn, friendly conversations, everything was cozy and homely. Megan was animatedly talking with Liz about some new books. Josh and little Amy were kicking a ball in the clearing. Michael felt grateful to fate for such friends. Neither of them ever awkwardly mentioned Jessica or the divorce. They just surrounded them with warmth as if nothing had happened. Later, when it got dark, Michael and the children returned to their house. The sky was filled with stars and crickets chirped in the air. They made a small fire right on the shore in front of the house. The flame illuminated the pine trees around, and was reflected in the eyes of the children. "Hold it carefully, don't drop it," Michael instructed Josh, who was roasting marshmallows on a twig. The boy, sticking out the tip of his tongue with zeal, made sure that the marshmallow did not burn. Megan sat nearby, warming her hands over the fire. Her face was calm and thoughtful. "Dad, you haven't dived into the water like you did today for a long time, right?" She smiled suddenly, looking at him with slyness. Michael laughed. "There are a few. I probably forgot how to do it. Did you see how I was drenched in sweat?" But Josh was happy, she said, watching her brother take the hot marshmallow from the twig and blow on it. "Very," the boy confirmed, putting the sticky sweetness into his mouth. "We swam so cool, Dad. Thank you for teaching me how to row a boat." "Please, boy," Michael smiled, feeling warm pride. For a while, they silently enjoyed dessert and the crackling of the fire. Michael thought that it had been a long time since he had seen children so happy. Even Megan looked peaceful now, as if a heavy burden had been lifted for a short while. "It's a pity Mom doesn't see this," she said unexpectedly quietly, looking at the fire. "We used to all sit together like this." Michael answered carefully. "Yes, it's a pity. But maybe one day we will be able to sit like this, albeit not like before, but peacefully." Megan didn't answer, just sighed quietly. Josh leaned against his father, already half asleep from a busy day. Michael hugged him and looked at his daughter. "No matter what, we will always be a family, just a little different." "You're right as always, Dad," she said slightly sadly and did not object when he pulled her towards him with his free hand. So they sat, the father hugged the children, flames danced in front of them, reflected in their eyes. Somewhere in the night birds called to each other. Michael felt truly calm in that moment, maybe for the first time in a long time. Later, after putting the children to bed in the small but cozy bedroom of the house, Josh was asleep before his head hit the pillow, and Megan asked to leave the window open so that he could hear the lake. Michael went out onto the porch. The fire had already gone out, only the coals were smoldering. He remembered Megan's words about Jessica. Yes, it's still a pity that this happened. He imagined for a moment, what if all four of them were here like before? Swimmers' children, marshmallows, stars. As if nothing had happened. My heart sank. But the reality was different. Michael sighed and looked up at the stars, whispering to himself, "Give us all the strength to cope." At that very moment, in the dark shadow of the coastal pines nearby, a woman stood holding her breath. Jessica arrived at the lake during the day, but did not dare show herself to her family. She watched from afar. She saw how the children laughed. She saw how Tom and Liz hugged them when they met. She saw this fire and the warm family unity only without her. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but she did not dare to approach. It was torn inside. On the one hand, an unbearable desire to rush to them, apologize, beg them to forgive, hug them. On the other hand, the understanding that they are happy now, and her appearance will only destroy everything. Watching Michael look up at the sky, Jessica wiped her face with her palm. He looked so strong, reliable in the light of the coals. The children had a good time with him, you can see it with the naked eye. "He's coping," she thought with bitter joy. "They're coping. Without me." Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. Quietly turning around, Jessica walked away to the place where she had left the car. She won't tell them she was here, and probably it will never be decided again. The daughter and son were in the safe hands of their father and her presence. Maybe they really do feel better without him, as Megan said. Tears blurred her path, but she mechanically walked to the car, as if trying to escape from the pain. The lake behind swayed peacefully in the moonlight, keeping its secrets. A lonely female figure disappeared into the darkness of the night country road, taking with it the broken heart of the mother, who only now truly realized what she had lost. September turned out to be unusually warm. On one of these Saturday mornings, under the bright sun, Michael brought Josh to the first training session of the children's football team. While the boys were warming up, Michael began talking with a young woman standing next to him. "Are you Joshua's father?" she asked with a friendly smile. "Yes, Michael Miller." He extended his hand. What about you? Emily Brooks. By the way, I'm his new class teacher, she answered with a slight laugh. It turned out that 8-year-old Brian, Emily's son, also plays football and is in the same class as Josh. While the children were kicking the ball around, Michael and Emily started talking. He learned that Emily was a widow. She lost her husband 3 years ago and was raising her son alone. She recently moved to their city and just started working at the school. Michael felt surprisingly at ease with this woman. They exchanged phone numbers, deciding to take the boys together to play. Josh and Brian became instant friends, and after training, the four of them went to an ice cream parlor. At a common table, Michael was surprised to notice that for the first time in a long time he was laughing sincerely and talking about himself to some new acquaintance without feeling either tension or pain. Emily was also clearly happy to chat. Their conversations jumped from topic to topic: children, school, hobbies. At one point, Josh exclaimed, "Dad, Miss Brooks knows about our space project," and Michael heard Emily's roaring laughter for the first time. "So that's who made a rocket out of bottles," she said, laughing. Michael found himself admiring her warm brown eyes and melodious laugh. A long forgotten feeling of lightness spread in my chest. In the evening, Emily invited Josh to spend the night with Brian. The boys happily rushed off to play, and Michael was left alone at home, but for the first time, loneliness was not painful. He corresponded with Emily, wondering how the guys were doing, and found himself looking forward to her messages. Thus began their friendly communication, which gradually grew into something more. Emily often saw Josh at school and told Michael how his day was going. In response, Michael helped as best he could. Either he fixed a leaky faucet at her house, or he picked up Brian and Josh from school. The children became closer, and Emily and Michael increasingly spent time as a foursome: joint picnics, going to the movies. At first, Megan was wary of her father's new acquaintance, but Emily did not get into her soul and spoke respectfully and gently. Gradually, Megan reached out to her first. She asked questions about the school theater. Emily had previously been involved in the drama club. Then somehow she brought her to show her her drawings. Michael watched with bated breath as a spark of understanding broke through between his daughter and Emily. Autumn flew by unnoticed. At the end of November, Michael took the risk of inviting Emily and Brian to spend Thanksgiving together at his home. To his delight, they agreed. The fireplace crackled in the cozy living room of Michael's house. At the table, the whole group felt like a big family: Michael next to Emily, Megan and Josh opposite, and between them was Brian, cheerfully chatting with Josh. They had already eaten the turkey and were now enjoying the pumpkin pie that Emily and Megan had baked. Michael watched as Megan quietly laughed at Emily's joke and Josh argued with Brian over who could eat more marshmallows. He felt deeply grateful for this evening. A year ago, his world was collapsing, and today there was laughter in the house again. When the table was empty, Emily began collecting the plates. Michael got up to help. In the kitchen, while washing the sauce off the dishes, he suddenly noticed a tiny speck of cream on Emily's cheek. Without thinking, he carefully wiped it off with his finger. Emily shuddered and raised her eyes to him. A spark of understanding ran between them. At that moment, Megan appeared at the kitchen door for water, and Michael retreated, embarrassed. But the daughter did not say anything. She just smiled from the corner of her lips, as if she was even happy for her father. Later, as Emily prepared to leave, they lingered on the porch. The children were already running out to Brooke's car to say goodbye to Brian. Michael and Emily were left alone under the cold, starry sky. "Thank you for today," Michael said quietly, looking into her eyes. "I haven't felt this good for a long time." "Me too," she answered, and in her grateful look there was more than just friendly warmth. Michael felt his heart pounding. He slowly leaned down and gently touched her lips with his lips. Emily responded with a kiss, carefully, tenderly. Michael felt dizzy. It seemed as if the whole world froze at that second. They looked away from each other and smiled, both flushed. "I wanted this for a long time," Emily whispered. "Me too," Michael answered happily. The sound of children laughing behind them was heard as Josh and Brian looked out of the car window with conspiratorial grins. Emily clapped a hand to her mouth, suppressing a giggle. "See you tomorrow, Mike," she said, still holding his hand. "See you tomorrow, Emily," he answered softly. Driving home, Michael noticed Megan's silhouette at the window. The daughter met him with a questioning look. "Are you happy?" he asked her quietly, entering the room to wish her good night. Megan hugged her father. "If you're happy, I'm happy too," she whispered. "Emily is good. She came to us like a ray of light." Michael's eyes welled up with tears, and he hugged his daughter tightly. For the first time in a long time, he truly believed that something good was ahead of them. The Christmas lights shone brightly on the front of Richard's mansion, but Jessica's heart was dark. There was a luxurious reception in the house, which Richard arranged for friends and partners. Jessica, in an elegant dress, wandered among the guests, feeling like a stranger. All she could think about was how her children were now celebrating Christmas without her. Richard noticed that she was depressed. Taking her by the elbow, he took his wife aside. "You're not yourself today, darling. Are you thinking about children again?" Jessica just silently lowered her head. Richard frowned. "I understand everything, but today is a holiday. Try to distract yourself." She nodded, but couldn't force a smile. After another hour, Richard could not stand it and asked softly but seriously, "Tell me honestly, do you regret leaving from me?" Jessica froze. Richard's attentive eyes searched her face for an answer. She realized that she could no longer lie neither to him nor to herself. "Yes, I regret it," she whispered barely audibly. Richard recoiled, his face darkening. "So all my efforts are in vain. Sorry, you are a wonderful person, but my heart is not here. I tried, but I can't forget my family. Children." Jessica didn't finish speaking, but everything was clear. Richard sighed heavily. He loved her, but he was not going to put up with the ghosts of the past settling between them. That night, Jessica and Richard decided to break up. He didn't kick her out, he suggested that she think it over after the holidays. But Jessica packed her things and went to her sister, feeling that it would be more honest. At Christmas dawn, she, trembling from the experience, burst into tears in Lizzie's arms. "I've lost everything," she repeated, "and Richard and family." "Not everything," my sister objected softly. "The children are alive and well, and while you are alive, you can try to regain their trust." These words touched something in Jessica's soul. Yes, Richard let her go. She lost her luxurious life, but perhaps she got the last chance to return the main thing. Already in the afternoon, having calmed down a little, Jessica plucked up the courage to call Megan. The daughter did not answer. Then she sent a long message in which she asked for forgiveness from the bottom of her heart and asked to be allowed to see each other. Surprisingly, an hour later, a short answer came. "Fine. Tomorrow, cafe on the main street during the day." Jessica could hardly believe her eyes. It was a tiny hope. The next day, Jessica arrived at the said cafe long before time. She was worried, twirling a cup of cold coffee in her hands. Finally, the door creaked and Megan appeared on the threshold. The daughter sat down opposite her, clenching her hands into fists. She looked wary and vulnerable. At first, they were silent. Then Jessica gathered her will and spoke quietly. "Thank you for coming." Megan was silent, looking away. Jessica continued. "I want to ask you for forgiveness. For everything. It's my fault that I destroyed our family." "Yes, the fault," Megan said sharply, and tears flashed in her eyes. "You betrayed us." "I know." Jessica lowered her head. "And I will regret this all my life. Just believe me, I love you. Very." And she never stopped loving for a day. "Then why did you leave?" The daughter asked chokedly. "Why did you leave me, Josh, Dad?" Jessica sobbed. "I was stupid. I was thinking about myself, not about you. I no longer ask for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. But it's important for me that you hear this. You and Josh are the most precious thing I have." Megan wiped away tears with the back of her hand. "There's so much I want to tell you." She began with a shaky breath. "How could you, Mom?" She didn't finish. Her voice trembled. Megan jumped up, unable to sit still from the feelings, and ran out of the cafe into the street. "Megan," Jessica screamed, rushing after her. The daughter almost ran along the sidewalk, smearing her tears. She didn't look and suddenly stepped onto the roadway, not noticing a car jumping out from around the corner. "Carefully," Jessica screamed. A few minutes later, an ambulance arrived. Paramedics placed Megan on a stretcher and allowed Jessica to ride with them. In the shaking ambulance, Jessica called Michael. The phone didn't answer right away, but when Michael picked up, Jessica blurted out through her sobs. "Michael, Megan is in trouble. She was hit by a car. We're going to the hospital." "What?" Michael's voice turned cold with horror. "Where are you?" "At the Central Hospital," Jessica moaned. "We'll be there now," he interrupted and passed out. Jessica clutched the phone to her chest, bursting into tears. She looked at her daughter's pale face and prayed to everyone she could that only Megan would survive. In the hospital emergency room, Megan was immediately taken to intensive care. Jessica, barely able to stand, was left waiting for news in the corridor. The world swam before her eyes. "Just so as not to lose you. Just not to lose you," she repeated mentally. Less than half an hour had passed when Michael ran into the hospital with Josh in his arms. Emily walked quickly behind her. Seeing Jessica, Michael came close. There was panic in his eyes. "What's wrong with her?" he shouted. "She is alive. Doctors are operating." Jessica stammered and, unable to bear it, burst into tears. "It's my fault. We quarreled," she ran out. Jessica pressed herself into her ex-husband's chest, crying. Emily, meanwhile, took the pale Josh aside, quietly calming the boy. The minutes dragged on painfully long. Finally, the door to the intensive care unit opened, and the doctor came out to the parents. The operation was successful. Michael covered his face with his hands, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." Jessica almost slid down the wall with relief. When Megan was transferred to the intensive care ward, it was already the morning of the next day. They were only allowed to come in one by one for a couple of minutes. Michael insisted that Jessica go first. Trembling, she walked to the bed and took her daughter's hand. Jessica burst into tears of joy and relief. "Maggie, dear, it's Mom. I'm nearby," she whispered, leaning over. "Forgive me, please." She stroked her daughter's hair, kissed her forehead, as she had done in childhood, and whispered kind words. It seemed that Megan did not hear, but at some point the girl's fingers weakly responded to the squeeze. Jessica held her breath. Megan opened her eyes slightly. Her gaze wandered, but she was clearly trying to understand what was happening. Jessica smiled through her tears. "Honey, you're in the hospital, but everything is fine. I'm with you. Dad is with you. We are all here." Megan blinked, and a tear rolled down the corner of her eye. Her lips moved under the oxygen mask. "Mother," she breathed out barely audibly. I'm here, dear," Jessica nodded fervently, squeezing her hand. "Quiet, don't tense up. Just know I love you, and I'll always be there if you let me." Megan's eyelashes fluttered. She seemed to nod, or Jessica thought she did. But the next moment the daughter closed her eyes, falling back into a healing sleep. Jessica stood there for another minute, smiling gratefully through her tears, then gave way to Michael. When Michael left the room after talking with his daughter, who had already woken up, his eyes shone with happiness. He walked up to Jessica and said quietly, "She asked where you were. I said you are here. She wants to see you." Jessica, standing next to the silent Josh and Emily, covered her mouth with her hand in shock. She was afraid to believe it. All together they entered the spacious ward, where Megan was soon transferred. The girl was pale and weak, but when she saw the family, she smiled faintly. Josh was the first to run up to his sister and hugged her carefully, bursting into tears with happiness that his little sister was alive. Michael hugged the two of them. Jessica froze at the door, not daring to approach. But Megan, seeing her, extended her hand. "Mother," she called hoarsely. Jessica jumped up and, sobbing, bent over her daughter. "I'm here, I'm with you." Forgive me, forgive me. Megan weakly squeezed her hand. Don't cry. Her voice was quiet, but confident. I love you, Mom. Jessica's throat tightened. She lowered herself and carefully hugged her daughter, trying not to touch the sensors. I love you too. More than life, she whispered. Michael stood nearby with his arm around Josh's shoulders. Emily, a little further away, was wiping away tears of emotion. It was a real miracle. Their family, although in a new form, once again rallied around the most precious thing, the life and health of the child. That day, all grievances were forgotten. All that was left was love and relief. 6 months have passed. The life of the Miller family has entered its new rut. Megan almost recovered, took off her tires, and returned to school. Jessica visited the children daily, and gradually their communication improved. Megan forgave her mother. She proved with her care and repentance that she would not betray her family again. Josh was really happy to see his mom often again. Michael and Emily became inseparable over these months. Emily moved in with the Millers at first to help care for Megan after her injury, and then she stayed and put a shining ring on her finger. Michael proposed to her. On that May day, when Megan was finishing 11th grade, a large table was set in the courtyard of the Millers' house. They celebrated a double holiday. Final exams were over, and Michael's engagement to Emily took place. Jessica was also invited. The children insisted. At first, she felt like a stranger, but when she saw Emily place her favorite apple pie in front of her and Michael pulled up a chair, she realized she was accepted. Emily easily talked to her about Josh's school success. Megan chirped, showing off her prom outfit. Jessica quietly rejoiced that there was no longer room for anger in her daughter's heart, only wisdom beyond her years that came through trials. Later, when twilight enveloped the garden, their entire large family, and there is no other way to say it, sat around the table by candlelight. Michael stood up and looked around at his family. Emily was smiling faithfully next to him. Megan was sitting on his left hand, holding Josh by the shoulders, and on the contrary was Jessica, beaming with quiet gratitude. Brian winked at Megan. Michael looked over this circle of faces and took the floor. I want to say thank you, he began hoarsely, to each of you. For strength, for forgiveness, for love. A year ago, I thought our family was broken forever. But you showed a miracle. We are together again. Let it be in a new format, but together. This is a priceless gift. Jessica, hearing these words, quietly sobbed. Emily gently squeezed his hand. I'll also say Megan suddenly raised her voice. I am grateful that I have such a strong family. I learned a lot, and I'm glad that now I have not one mother, but even two. She smiled and looked at Emily and Jessica in turn. Both women clasped their hands in excitement. And two dads. Megan laughed and winked at Tom, who also looked at the light. Everyone laughed. Well, I'm grateful that I'm allowed to eat pie while you're talking here. Josh, who had already managed to smear his nose with cream, cleared the atmosphere. Cheerful laughter finally drove away the remnants of sentimental tears. A cheerful toast after toast began. Many words of love and hope were shared that evening. Jessica sat, a little away, watching Josh and Brian fooling around together, watching Michael tenderly hug a laughing Emily and Megan beaming with happiness. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, absorbing this hubbub, this warm light of loved ones. Once upon a time, due to her stupidity, she lost all this, but fate allowed her to miraculously find her family again. It may be different, but the main thing is that they all have each other. Jessica felt a hand on her shoulder. Opening my eyes, I saw Megan. The daughter smiled. Ma, let's come to our place, shall we? And with a nod, she called to join the general fun. Jessica wrapped her arms around her daughter's waist. Of course, dear, I'm with you. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.